What's up, guys? Welcome back to my series known as Rob Theories. It's kind of a series where I really just take random topics or pieces of news that come into my head that aren't necessarily relevant to a lot of big things going on, but something that makes me kind of ponder some of the big pictures in gaming, and kind of turn it into a discussion that I get to have with you guys about something, like I said, not so specific to a piece of news per se, but something that more starts a larger conversation in my head that I like to share with you guys. What I'm doing today is sort of, in a way, a response to IGN's recent re-review of Splatoon for the Wii U. And we know that Splatoon was a really big deal this year because it was a very successful game for Nintendo. Not a lot of huge breakout Wii U titles this year, but Splatoon was definitely one of them. It was a brand new IP. It was Nintendo's first foray from a first-party perspective into the shooter genre, and it's been massively successful. And I definitely agree with it being successful. I think the game is fantastic. I've talked about it a couple times on recent videos. I haven't had many opportunities to actually talk about Splatoon on the channel this year, which seems a little bit odd. When they did the initial global test fire before the game released, I actually did do a Let's Play of that, which was really fun. I did sort of a live podcast kind of thing with Terminator Juice and Jay Fleming, and that was really cool. But other than that, I haven't brought it up on the channel too many times. And it's tricky because the game didn't deliver in a lot of the things that I was hoping it would, but it is still fantastic. And I love that game, and I think its success is well-deserved. And I am beyond excited for whatever Splatoon 2 turns out to be. Splatoon, for the NX or whatever happens there. So Splatoon's been a really interesting case. It was also mired in a lot of controversy right out the gate, most notably for the lack of voice chat, which is something that has not been remedied, and I don't ever see being remedied, and that's fine. That's neither here nor there for me. It was a very big deal to a lot of people, understandably. For me, I never really cared. The other reason it was pretty controversial is because when that game first came out, it didn't have a whole lot of content. It was lacking a lot of weapon variety, it was lacking a lot of upgradable gear, and most notably, it was lacking in the modes department and in the maps department for the multiplayer stuff. It was very bare bones when it first launched. So it came out with its review. IGN initially reviewed the game as a 7.9, which is still a pretty respectable score, especially considering how bare bones it was, because the gameplay was so strong. And again, I stand by how strong the gameplay is in that game. But Splatoon started to roll out something that I think is very unprecedented, an unbelievable barrage of free content updates. And I don't mean just like one or two. Most of you know what I'm talking about. It seemed like every couple of weeks or every other month, there was a new map or two being added, several new, there was two new game modes that were added sporadically over the last several months. There was also a bunch of weapon rollouts. There was always like another weapon or two weapons. Every time I turned the game on, it felt like I had to get stopped before I could get into the game so they could tell me about another 3 or 4 new weapons that showed up out of nowhere. Not to mention general patch updates and balancing updates. So there's been a lot going on, and it's again very unprecedented because it's all been completely free of charge. It was actually something that Nintendo talked about rolling out before the game even came out. So long story short is Splatoon became this game where so much content came out after release, post-release of that game in May, I believe. Yeah, definitely May this year. And again, all for free, and it's arguably vastly changed that game as far as how it plays, how much fun it can be, and how much content there is to experience. And so because of that, IGN gave the game a re-review where they straight up changed the score of that game from the 7.9 it launched at to a brand new score of 8.6. It improved the score of the game. And I'm willing to bet that IGN really did this, I think, kind of because the updates were free. So it was almost like, well, this isn't like DLC per se. This is really just more complete aspects of the game. They didn't do what a game like Destiny did, for example, which is a game I love. But I will admit, all the updates, not all the updates, most of the content updates for Destiny cost a lot of money. I've put a lot of money into Destiny. I bought it for $60. I bought 2 $20 DLC packages and then the $40 DLC for the Taken King. And it's created a wonderful Destiny experience, but I put a lot of money into that. Splatoon is sitting here with almost as much content as Destiny, and it's only cost me the day one purchase price of $60. I've paid nothing else for all of the crazy content that game has given me, and that's pretty cool. So because of all this, I wanted to explore the idea of re-reviewing games, and is that something in today's culture that we should maybe expect more of in the future, or basically, is it a good idea? Do I think, or should we start to look at the idea of re-reviewing as an acceptable and expected practice? it's kind of, I feel like, a semi-controversial sort of statement, although I feel like everything is controversial on the damn internet when it comes to gaming anymore. But I guess when I say controversial, I can see a lot of people falling on different sides of the fence with this, like as with most topics. And you know, I think the reason I wanted to talk about this is because, yes, I think that re-reviewing games, we're almost at the point where we already should have been re-reviewing games. But we haven't been. Splatoon is one of the first instances I can think of, if not the first. It's probably happened before, especially with things like, re-releases of like MMO games like WoW or the Elder Scrolls Online Tamriel Edition, stuff like that. But it's, for me, I think it's one of the first true console-only experiences where a game released one way, a couple of months later it's almost a totally different game, and a high-profile website, arguably IGN being the highest profile, was willing to re-review it and completely eradicate its old score, and now the only thing you can find anywhere online for a score for Splatoon from IGN is the brand new score of 8.6, and they call it Splatoon version 2. So I think that we're at the point where we need to start expecting this, and I personally think it's okay. Now, I can see a lot of people turning this into a pretty heated debate of, well, and this is actually a pretty good argument too, like a review for a game is a snapshot of the time that that game was released and a snapshot of the state that that game was in when it released. And so that should always be reflected. And to that, I agree. It's kind of where, when it comes to, again, using IGN Splatoon re-review as an example, I sort of think that it should still include the initial review. I think that we should understand, well, that game did release. Granted, it released very, very fun and very unique, but with not enough content for a lot of people probably to justify a $60 purchase, whereas nowadays it obviously does, and I think that maybe we shouldn't lose that snapshot in time. I think the initial review for any game going forward, if we do this, needs to be reflected. But that being said, I think that there's absolutely a case to be made, especially in today's crazy DLC world. I think that there is a case to be made for games getting re-reviews. And of course, another great example is another game I already brought up. It's Destiny. Now, yes, there are different levels of how we can approach this, and maybe this needs to be factored into reviews going forward, or re-reviews going forward, and that's the fact that Splatoon has a bunch of new content that costs nothing. Destiny had a bunch of new content, really, really excellent content, that did unfortunately cost what I can say is too much money. I bought that stuff because I really like Destiny. I've enjoyed the content. I can afford to do so, so I didn't mind doing it. But a large majority of gamers and regular everyday people probably can't afford to buy this much content for just one game that they like. I just picked up Star Wars Battlefront. You can see it running behind me. And I love Star Wars more than I almost love breath in my lungs. But I am not willing to pay $50 for that season pass. I just don't think that it's worth it, and I don't think that we should be running into those practices. But if I look at the grand scheme of things and what it means for a game to have content available, I think that in a year or two, it might be fair to assess what Star Wars Battlefront offers you in terms of content once all of these different, I don't remember what they're called, the different DLC packs basically are made available, not to mention maybe even drop in price. So, you know, there's another aspect too. I'm glad I almost forgot this. I'm glad I didn't. Is when you think about re-reviewing a game, the other thing is sometimes the improvement of games gets better because the performance can be improved with patches and updates. And I think that that's almost more important, arguably, than just the content available, because you do get into the gray area of content of how much does it cost to buy, you know, the Taken King for Destiny, and how much does it cost to buy Cloud or Ryu in Smash Brothers, and how much does it cost to buy the extra cups in Mario Kart, and all the other crazy freaking DLC packs in Battlefront or Batman Arkham Knight. How much does that cost versus how good it is? That might be harder to weigh on like a numbered scale of a review. But when it comes to the performance of a game, that can be even more huge. Let's take another very recent easy example. One of my favorite games right now, Fallout 4, or any of the Fallout games, or any of Bethesda's games. Games that are very well known for being fantastic. People love them. There's a crazy amount of stuff to do. The worlds are very immersive. They review and sell like crazy. But they're very glitchy and buggy. And for some people, that's enough to say, I ain't even touching that shit with a 10-foot pole. And I understand it. I think you're missing out on great games, but I definitely understand what you're saying. And I will admit that my favorite of Bethesda's games have bugs and glitches in them. That being said, a lot of times those games, they get patched a lot throughout their life, and those patches don't cost any money. And if you play Fallout 3 today in 2015, it is vastly improved and a much more enjoyable gaming experience than it was in 2008 when that game released. Same with Skyrim, same with Oblivion, same with Fallout New Vegas, and I'm sure the same will be said with Fallout 4. So when you look at how a game like a Fallout 3 releases in 2008, you might be able to say, wow, it's so great, but there's so many glitches and bugs. I'm going to give that an 8.0. But if you can fix a huge chunk of those glitches and bugs and make it an almost seamless experience, and then take into account all the other great things it does, I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people might bump a score up from an 8 to maybe a 9 or a 9.5, you know, obviously depending, it's a very subjective thing. It's a review we're talking about. But I think that the theory I'm putting in place is still sound. A game can be improved as far as how it looks, how it plays, how it feels, how broken or non-broken it is, and how easy it is to complete based on the passage of time. And, you know, to kind of sum this whole thing up, I know that a lot of people might feel that it might be unfair to re-review games. I personally don't think it is, because you know what? Someone may be picking up Splatoon right now, and that Splatoon they're going to pick up right now is different than the Splatoon that maybe you or I picked up on day one for $60 that didn't have a lot of content. Someone may wait 2 years to buy Fallout 4, and the Fallout 4 in 2 years is probably going to look and play a hell of a lot better than the Fallout 4 right now. And as someone who loves Fallout 4 right now, I can only imagine how much better it would be if some of the glitches and bugs are removed or fixed. And that being said, I do have to say one thing about Fallout 4, and I've talked about this before too. Yes, it's glitchy and buggy, but it is the least glitchy and buggy of any Bethesda game yet. So they are still working very hard to try to improve that stuff. They know it's kind of their legacy in their games, I think, and they want to kind of remove that from their legacy, which I understand, and Fallout 4 is a great game. But anyway, you know, at the topic at hand, that's kind of how I feel. In a perfect world, what I personally think, to find a good balance between, you know, what everybody may want or not want, I do think that if we get into this culture where re-reviewing games becomes more and more common and more appropriate, which, like I said, I feel like we almost should have already been doing this, the way the internet has changed how games can work the last several years and the whole last generation. I do think that it would be best to not necessarily remove the original review. I think that games with re-reviews should always still reflect the original review, maybe a summary of what led to that original review, as far as, oh, you know, like it's really glitchy here and it crashed on me a couple times and, you know, there's not enough weapons to make me feel satisfied, but it's still good otherwise, here's the score. And then here's the re-review score and a new summary that says, man, you know, there wasn't a lot of weapons last time and the game crashed on me a few times, you know, last time, but now it doesn't crash at all. And now there's a lot more weapons for me to choose from and it makes this game feel much more enjoyable. Here's the new score. I think that's the best compromise, but I do mostly want to leave you in this video with the idea that I personally support the idea of re-reviewing games, and I think it's totally fair to acknowledge that people may buy a game way after it's been improved, either via DLC content updates or by patches and fixing, you know, broken issues with games. I think it's completely fair to say someone buying a game after it's been fixed and improved with content is getting a better value than the people who maybe bought it when it didn't have those things. And there's nothing wrong with reflecting that in like a review score. I think that that's completely okay. So, you know, that's my take on it. I think that what IGN did is pretty cool. I can't call it revolutionary, but I think it was a bold step coming from them, and I really appreciate that they took a game that I think is fantastic, and I know a lot of you guys out there think is fantastic, and they did reassess it and acknowledge that, hey, Nintendo is doing something unprecedented with crazy amounts of high-quality new content that is free. It's 2015, guys, and it's free. Look at the awesome game behind me. That shit ain't free. Batman Arkham Knight, that shit ain't free. Anything EA or Activision is making, none of that stuff is free. Even a lot of Nintendo stuff isn't free. But Splatoon's has been free. So they're doing great things there. IGN was willing to recognize and acknowledge that and give it an appropriate score and say, hey, they've done great things to vastly improve this game. Here's the new score. This is why it's even more worth your time now than it was when it launched back in May. I think that's pretty cool. So those are my thoughts. That's the Rob theory today. My theory is we should allow for re-reviews in the future, maybe expect them to be more and more frequent as the years come on. The internet has just changed the way games can operate and to change the long-term life of a game. And in some ways it's bad, $50 DLC, but in other ways it's really good, improving patches and making free content update like in Splatoon. So that's how I feel about this stuff. Tell me what side of this discussion you guys fall on. Do you think that it's okay to expect that? Do you think that it's something that shouldn't be allowed? If they allowed it, do you maybe agree with my idea that we should still always reflect the original score? Do you think the whole idea is just batshit crazy and no one should even consider it ever? And I'm nuts for even bringing it up. So you guys tell me what you think. Also tell me what you thought of IGN's re-review of Splatoon. And that's it for this edition of Rob Theories. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. And this is Rob of World to Review. I'll catch you guys next time on another video.